In 1065 AD, following the death of King Edward the Confessor, Harold Godwinson ascended to the throne of England. Shortly into Harold II's reign, William of Normandy invaded, and at the Battle of Hastings he claimed the throne for himself. After his coronation, he became known as William the Conqueror. But this is not the story of William the Conqueror. This is the story of an altogether more remarkable man. Duke Morcar of York was a good man. He was brave, ambitious, zealous in his religious beliefs, somewhat arbitrary, but otherwise a good person. While Morcar looked after the northeast of England and the Duchy of York, his brother held the Duchy of Warwick to the southwest. The British Isles were split into several different kingdoms at the time. Of these kingdoms, England and Scotland were the two largest, with Wales being split into several different regions, and Ireland was a bit of a mess. There was, however, no question as to who was in charge. William the Conqueror controlled all of England, and he had his eyes on the rest of the British Isles. William and Morcar had a lot in common. They were both ambitious, both brave, both stunningly handsome. But where Morcar was zealous and fervent in his religious beliefs, William was slightly more cynical. If there is a god, he should fear me, because I am the dog's bollocks. All of Morcar's vassals were quite fond of him, with the exception of Count Osulf, who hid away in the very north of the kingdom, plotting and scheming. It followed then that with the support of his vassals, the only thing Morcar needed was the friendship of the king. But that could wait. The first thing he needed to do was to find himself a wife. After perusing the medieval dating pool for about 5 minutes, he decided that the Princess of Hungary was an excellent choice. As was the fashion at the time, he asked someone other than the princess whether she'd like to get married, and someone other than the princess came back to him and said that that was fine. So far, things were going quite smoothly. Morcar told his wife to get started on producing an heir, while he focused on preventing King William from hating him. Initially, things went well. Morcar was put in charge of the city of Leeds and its child count, Jean. As King William continued to divvy out new territories, Morcar and his brother Edwin became two of the most powerful dukes in the country. Morcar was quite happy with this situation, so when King William declared war on Scotland to claim the territory of Cumberland, he volunteered to assist. And William thought that was a pretty chill move. Since Cumberland was right next to Morcar's territories, his armies arrived long before King William's. Upon arriving at the siege camp, it is reported that Morcar addressed his troops and said, "The Earl of Cumberland. That is a step on which I must fall down, or leap, for in my way it lies." To this day, nobody is quite sure what he meant. The King of Scotland sent an army to Northumberland, which Morcar couldn't deal with as he was too busy with the ongoing siege. A few days later, Cumberland fell, the Battle of Northumberland took place, and members of the Scottish royal family were kidnapped. The war was over. When Morcar returned home, he decided his wife was okay, actually. He might even love her a bit, and then he got her pregnant. For a brief period of time, things were good. Morcar was made the Duke of Cumbria to reward his war efforts, and his son was born. Adelheid wanted to call the boy Siegbert. Morcar refused, and instead named the baby boy after his favourite baker. Pleased to finally have an heir, Morcar told his wife he also quite fancied a daughter to be used as a bargaining chip down the line. Noticing that his wife was a bit sad, Morcar went to her and comforted her, gaining him the kind trait. He tried to get people to start calling him Morcar the Kind, but it didn't catch on. Over the coming months, the boy Count of Leeds grew into an adult, and Morcar made the admirable but ultimately pointless move of converting to Norman culture to attempt to impress the king. Meanwhile, King William decided to declare war on France. As much as Morcar wanted to join him in this one, he didn't have enough boats, so he stayed home. And besides, his wife was pregnant again, so he had other things to attend to. At least that's what he told her at first, until he spotted that some French armies had landed on the mainland, so he went off to fight them. While en route to intercept the French, he discovered that Count Jean of Leeds was plotting against him. Since he was a kind man, Morcar didn't immediately arrest Count Jean and instead politely asked him to stop. After crushing the French at the Battle of Middlesex, Morcar was returning home when he received more news from Count Jean. Count Jean declared, "My lord, I have tea about one of your vassals." Instead of asking him to spill the tea, Morcar sent the following letter. 2 things. 1. Don't be a snitch. 2. Old news. Cringe. Soon the news reached York that the war with France was over. While attempting to find his wife to tell her the good news, Morcar was taken aback to find her reading, which was strange, and secondly reading romantic poetry. He declared the books to be the work of Satan and inadvertently made his wife chaste. Thankfully, she was already pregnant, and soon after that, their daughter was born. Morcar named the girl after his favourite hot drink. News soon reached England that the Scots were revolting. Morcar was about to make a hilarious if predictable joke when he learned that Osolf was plotting against him. Morcar politely asked him to stop, which didn't work. In a hurtful twist, he learned that the plot was also being backed by King William and also his brother Edwin. Seeing no other option, Morcar attempted to imprison Osolf, which didn't work, as Osolf raised his flag in rebellion and a war started. As Morcar's armies laid siege to Osolf's capital, he was about to make another rousing speech when he received a tap on the shoulder. His brother Edwin was dead. Having been mangled and left crippled by the war in France, he had sadly passed away. Since his brother hadn't gotten round to having any children, Morcar inherited all of his territory and immediately became the second most powerful man in England. The sudden influx of power combined with his brother's death sadly drove Morcar insane, and he started rambling about how heresy would be the downfall of the entire Christian world. Following his fall to insanity, his first order of business was recruiting a giant to lead his armies. Knowing that his city was surrounded by the army of a madman led by a giant, Osolf decided to surrender and was imprisoned. What Osolf didn't expect was that he would be immediately released. Morcar's unique combination of kindness and lunacy made him very unpredictable. To reward Osolf for his treachery, Morcar appointed him Master of the Horse. Meanwhile, England was being brought to its knees by a consumption epidemic in the southwest and a measles outbreak in the Duke's own territory. On top of that, some peasants in Norfolk had decided to revolt. While Morcar was willing to forgive one of his vassals for betraying him, he was certainly not ready to extend the same kindness to peasants. He assisted King William in squashing them back into the dirt where they belonged. Unfortunately, all the peasant squishing had distracted Morcar from the ongoing measles and consumption epidemics. He soon received news that his chancellor had died of a combination of dysentery and tuberculosis. On top of that, the chancellor had died on the toilet, which was quite embarrassing. Thankfully, all this dreary news was interrupted by the birth of Morcar's second son. He called the boy Dale, because just like the Yorkshire Dales, he would never be king. King William decided that a territory in the centre of the consumption epidemic was an excellent target for his next war. Being the brave, ambitious lunatic that he was, Morcar agreed to lead his troops directly into the heart of the consumption epidemic. Upon returning to York, he began to develop a fever. Then he was diagnosed with consumption. Despite consumption being highly contagious, the court physician ordered him to start taking daily walks. A few days later, Morcar developed chest pains. He bravely insisted that the physician try a treatment that had never been attempted before. By the time the procedure was over, Morcar had lost a hand and gained the nickname Morcar the Ill Ruler of York. King William asked Morcar if he wanted to join him in a war on Norway, but Morcar refused as he was busy trying to find a giant woman to marry his giant army general. In a few months' time, Morcar had made a full recovery from consumption. It had left him badly disfigured, but he was alive. It is unclear why the treatment for a respiratory disease had left his face scarred. Leaping back into action, Morcar received news that one of his nephews living in Wales was plotting to kill his son Greggs. Morcar invited his nephew to visit him in an attempt to trap him. Somehow this worked, but when his guards tried to arrest the nephew, he did manage to slip away. At this point, Morcar began to feel invincible, and in doing so, he did gain a few extra pounds. He then immediately lost the extra pounds when his wife told him to. A few days later, his wife declared that she was once again pregnant. Rather than staying with his pregnant wife, Morcar instead decided to go and lead the English forces in Norway. Upon receiving news that his third son had been born, he ordered that the son be named after his second favourite hot drink. In a shocking twist, William the Conqueror was excommunicated by the Pope for being a warmonger. Since the war with Norway had initially been started because the Pope had excommunicated them, it was a bit too hypocritical for William to continue the war. Morcar returned home to the news that his spymaster had been plotting against him, which is the opposite of what his spymaster was for. Since it was the ever-trustworthy Jean of Leeds who'd brought the news to him, he appointed Jean to be his new spymaster. The old spymaster refused to be imprisoned and instead raised arms in rebellion. This was becoming a bit of a trope. As Morcar laid waste to his own lands once again, he received some deeply, deeply troubling news. The Duke of Gloucester and several other minor dukes had launched a rebellion against King William. With his former spymaster safely arrested and thrown in the deepest hole that could be found, Morcar thought about his place in the now divided England. His wife started showing symptoms of dysentery, and I forgot to check what happened to her, so hopefully she was alright. The opportunistic Welsh saw the English revolt as their opportunity to seize back some land. Unfortunately, they decided to target Morcar's land first. The opportunistic French also saw their moment to cause a bit of chaos. Meanwhile, Morcar was helping William to deal with the Duke of Gloucester. After a crushing defeat to the rebels at the Battle of St. Paul's, Morcar retreated back up north. King William's army tried and failed to push the Welsh back. As if things couldn't get any worse, heretics began popping up in Cumberland and Cornwall. The English revolt under the Duke of Gloucester was crushed, but the Welsh still had a foothold in the north of England. Morcar insisted that all of his vassals had to contribute their personal armies to the war effort. And together, with their powers combined, they drove the Welsh back where they came from. Wales. Just as Morcar thought he had secured peace in his time, one final curveball was thrown his way. He recalled the beginnings of his lunacy, how he prophesied that heresy would bring down all of Christendom. And in Cornwall, an army of heretics had indeed risen. Morcar had a choice. Would he stand by the king, who had treated him with nothing short of disdain from day one? Or would he side with the heretics and forge a new England, under a new banner, under a new king? Let me know in the comments.